Hi there, everyone. I'm David Miller-Durrant. I lead the Emerging Technologies division at NEAR. And it does work, fabulous. And yeah, it's great to be here. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the BOS, B-O-S. So it's really, really good to be at a Polkadot conference, because for a long time we've felt that sort of as a relatively small ecosystem, fragmentation is going to absolutely kill us. You know, sort of it's, for a long time we've been competing with each other and trying to build separate things and having separate ecosystems. And I'm really, really excited to sort of new multi-chain approach that we're trying out. So first of all, caveat emptor, haven't quite had time to run this speech by anyone in my company. So all opinions are my own. But yeah, so for those of you who live and breathe Polkadot and have never heard of NEAR before, we are a chain that was launched in 2020. We're sort of your classic workhorse L1. We do very fast finality, so we finish in about 1 second. We run on WebAssembly. We're cheap, about as cheap as these kind of protocols can go. And we scale, which is, those are all sort of pretty nice properties. But also from another perspective, they're much more reasons not to be turned away from the protocol. You know, sort of it's not so slow that you can't use it. The latency isn't so high that your applications will grind to a halt. If you have a large application that does a lot of transactions, you're not going to bring the network to a halt, or the gas fees aren't going to go through the roof. And one of the problems we have as an ecosystem is that there's kind of a lot of networks that fit that bill pretty well. You know, sort of there's that are fast enough, cheap enough, scale well enough. So we sort of ended up in a situation where developers would look at these sort of groups of because I mean, this could well describe Polkadot in a lot of ways. So we ended up in a bit of an awkward situation there, which is that developers would effectively roll the dice to pick a blockchain. They would sort of go to some random hackathon, have a name, like have a friend who recommended something, or just sort of really like the logo of their chain of choice, which basically just led to an inability to build sort of really good ecosystems. You know, sort of a DEX is nothing without tokens. A marketplace for NFTs is nothing without NFTs. And when you have those things living in sort of 30 different places, you lose the ability to sort of reach that tipping point of having a big enough community to start attracting more people than you lose. So, you know, we sort of built this chain in 2020. We really liked it. We thought it was great. And then we did the same thing everyone else did. We saw this happening, and we went out and we did evangelism. We have a fabulous DevRel team who put a crazy amount of work into getting as many people understanding and using this protocol as possible. But so did everyone else. So we still end up with this sort of really, really nice fragmented ecosystem where, you know, sort of no one dominates. When you look at a chain, you don't say, generally, that chain does this thing so much better than anyone else. So I have to use that chain. That's the obvious place for all of my applications to live, except maybe Ethereum with sort of the concentration of capital. So yeah, that's sort of the history. So we're still growing. You know, we've got a pretty good growth rate. Last year, things are going relatively well. We've got a pretty high number of sort of total accounts and a pretty high number of active accounts. But you know, sort of collectively, us and every single chain like it are about the same size as one large American tech company. So how do we fix this? About 9 months ago, we sat down and we said, this is not the hockey stick of growth we were hoping for it to be. And we said, let's focus on the things that we're better than anyone else at. and sort of laser focus, because what we built was an everything blockchain, a chain you could use for every single application sort of equally relatively well. And instead, what we're going to try and do, using this thing we call the boss, is focus on the strengths of our chain and focus on making sure we can use the strong parts of our chain on everyone else's chain. So, sort of deal with one small part of the application. So this is the boss stack, sort of distilled down. First, let's talk about onboarding. For anyone who's worked in the space for any period of time, you know full well for onboarding users, wallets absolutely suck. Someone comes along and they want to use your CryptoKitties application, and you've got to explain a 22-step process involving 2 rounds of KYC, some sort of magical set of 36 words that they've got to remember, but don't write it down anywhere, else it'll get stolen. Scary messages telling you, here's some technology you really don't understand, and you're going to have to use it. You've got to go to an exchange, you've got to talk to people. It's entirely inaccessible to lots of the world, and it's a real pain in the ass for even those of us who are most connected. And it can take half an hour. And we were seeing with wallets, when people had to fund their accounts, attrition rates in sort of the very high 90s, so sort of 95 to 98% of your users disappearing. And that's terrible, because it's not just the users you lose that day. Sort of an ecosystem for a product, or sort of the users of a product, attract other users. And at some point, you reach sort of a tipping point of having enough users, and your users start coming more easily. With a 98% attrition rate on people actually onboarding to wallets, you're going to find that it's very difficult to start that sort of metaphorical fire of a community. So the first, we also have some other things we'll talk about later. So the first thing we did was we effectively reversed our gas model. So we realized that making users pay up front to use their gas was making people save tens of dollars in gas, and we're losing thousands of dollars worth of users, which is kind of insane and not anything people would want to do. So we reversed our gas model. We gave people the options to, when you build a smart contract, to pay for users to use your smart contract, much like you would in AWS. So you basically just put credit on it, and people can use that as much as they like in situations decided by the smart contract using a technology called relayers. The next thing we did was we made our wallets much easier to sign up to. We made this thing called FastAuth. Interesting, that was animated on my slides, but apparently not anymore. Anyway, FastAuth is very simple. What it does is you sign up with an email address, you sign in with sort of any compatible OAuth account, and our smart contracts take a proof of the ownership of that OAuth account and can use it as a key. And this is really sort of connected to the thing that Near does best, which is accounts. We talk about the other things far too much, but the one thing Near does really well is accounts. We have the ability to have effectively Turing-complete code run on each account, which allows you to use absolutely anything that you can prove as a key. Hold keys that have scoped access. So, for example, you can have a key which can only call a single application, or can only call a single application on a Tuesday, or can only withdraw up to 1 Near at a time, or 1 Near in a week, or whatever you want to do. And that allows you to write logic where you can say, hey, you can sign in with an email, you can sign in with your Google account, but if you want to withdraw 10,000 Near, you need to attach your ledger key. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, we have using passkeys and using emails, we have a standard Web 2 onboarding experience. And we saw our sort of conversion rates go from, our loss of conversion rates go from sort of the high 90s to about 75%, which 75% doesn't sound great, but if you think of the change between sort of 2 or 3% of users sticking around and sort of 20 to 25% of users sticking around, it's quite a big difference. You notice it when you start building products, and you notice the sort of rate of onboarding really picking up. And we've had real success with partners kind of jumping on this, because sort of, would this slide have been animated, you'd see it takes about 3 to 5 seconds to sign up and make an account, which is very good. So yeah, we think we've got onboarding down. The next thing we want to do is attach this, so you sort of have your key management there to some extent. We want to make it really, really easy to deploy a front end which is sort of hosted in a decentralized manner. Right now, hosting front ends is, you either do it on Vercel and you hope for the best, or you just have to go through some sort of crazy hoops about finding somewhere to put it, having some sort of account on it, all this kind of stuff. What we built is a series of sort of composable React components, which can be hosted in a decentralized context. So every single small bit of React that is connected to a smart contract can be picked up, edited, and dropped into your application with no reliance on the individual who made it. So first of all, the component can't escape from its sort of little area. It can't draw over other components. It can't take keys. It can't do anything like that. It's very much sandboxed in sort of a virtual environment. And secondly, it gives you the ability to remix very easily everyone else's code that you see. And it's all included. So there's zero hosting setup. You literally just edit your code. You push a transaction to the chain, and suddenly you have a website up and running, which sort of makes things much easier. One of the things that we had to do when we were doing this was somewhat loosen the definition of decentralization, which it was a bit of a shame. But as anyone who's tried to make websites on chain here will know, practically, it's very, very difficult to host a website in an entirely decentralized way. Fundamentally, someone has to own the domain name. Someone has to, maybe not entirely, but someone generally has to own the SSL certificate. Someone, there's all these kind of things. And also fundamentally, all these sort of very secure chains, you have to host a very small piece of JavaScript which bootstraps whatever kind of verification you're going to be doing. So we said, how can we keep the spirit of decentralization alive with these constraints that exist? So what we say with our front ends is decentralization is the ability to switch provider at the press of a button without losing anything. So anyone can host a sort of near.org style website. You can just deploy it to Vercel. It'll start working automatically. You can buy your own domain. You can use it. You can customize it. But we're just one of the first places people drop into. So this is one of the places where you can get the things you need. So yeah, this is live right now. And the final part of it, which is most interesting for this conference, is the multi-chain side of things. Now, the multi-chain side of things isn't quite finished yet. We've still got a lot of work left to do on that. But effectively, what we're going to have when it is done is the ability to hold private keys inside of a smart contract. Now, obviously, holding private keys in a smart contract is very easy, provided you don't mind if someone can steal them. But what we want to be able to do is have the ability for smart contract logic to sign arbitrary messages when it's sort of programmatically made to do so. So, for example, if you have a Solana app, what you will do is sort of request permissions to sign Solana transactions with this key to the user. And you can put arbitrary restrictions on there once again. So you can say, if this person spends more than 1 sol in a day, they need to go through some other form of verification. You can do the nice onboarding stuff we can do, which is to pay for certain applications to be used for free. So you basically load up some funds onto a key and say you can only use this key if you are using my application and sort of under these circumstances, which I think is really, really cool once it's out. But my team is going to have a lot of sleepless nights between now and then, making sure it's all secure and well done. So yeah, the use case for the boss is your application already lives where your application lives, and it lives there for good reasons. What we want to do is you keep your backend where your backend is, and we want to make things better on the front end using the NEAR protocol in as many ways as we possibly can. So I've talked about the big things: onboarding, keys, security, authentication in depth, like what you have in Google, where if you check your emails, you don't need to type your password in, but if you try and change your password, you do need to type your password in. And then we're trying to add 1,000 little things to make all of our developers' lives a bit better. So everything we built is optimized for sort of speed of learning, which is how quickly can you go from nothing to an application? How quickly can you iterate on your application and get it out to your users? And how quickly can you look at someone else's app and change something you don't like about it, which I think is the coolest kind of thing, so the remixing aspect of things. So we have an example flow here. Here's this chap who looks suspiciously like Lionel Messi, and he would really like to make a workout app. We have a big library of components right now, over 1,000 in the near store. And what he can do effectively is he can look at existing components, pick them up, and throw them down into his app. So that's kind of his idea. So as soon as he signs in for the first time, he automatically has a developer page. The reason for that is we want to get people to spin out their own applications as quickly as they can and have zero friction in between sort of using something and editing it. Sort of very much in the spirit of the blockchain way of doing things. So obviously, Idris lands. He doesn't have any components, but he can go over to Mintbase, who does have a bunch of components, and he can just go in and immediately take a look at it. It's got, you can look at it working, you can view the source, you can share it, but most importantly, you can fork it. And when you fork it, you get sort of access to sort of very, very simple, all it is a React component, which you can edit in the browser. Obviously, you can also fork it on GitHub, which is not a big problem for those of you who like using real developer tools. And you can edit it, change it. We have a very, very simple sort of no SQL, store your data. Don't worry too much about how it works. Technically, you're writing a smart contract, but you'd never know. You write how it looks. You pick up the components you like, you put them down, and suddenly you have an application. So you'd kind of think that's where what we're doing to help you would end. You have your onboarding, you have your multi-chain stuff, you have your front end, you have your hosting, but we try and keep going from there. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it. But we want to help you do acquisition as well, because getting your first 100 users is really, really difficult in the Web3 space, even with this better onboarding. So first thing we do is we basically have a discussion place, which is sort of a social model. Now, near.org, the way we configure it, all components can be shared using social areas. And components are effectively a way to view data on the blockchain. So if you search for something, or if you view some sort of alien data in an application, it will automatically show you a component which is right for that data, which sort of allows for very, very quick discovery of applications for data that's relevant for you. So you can do sort of a full text search for something you're interested in. For example, an Aurora NFT. You can search for it, and the Aurora NFT box will pop up. You can click it. You're suddenly in the Aurora NFT application. We also roll in a form of notifications. Now, when you move to your own thing, you also need to spin up a notification system too, but we do this for free. Of course, we have the onboarding, which is actually slightly better illustrated now because it's in one place. So, you type in your email, you get an account ID selected for you, you verify your email, and you create a passkey, and you're done. And it's synced between all your different devices. And that is the whole onboarding process. So we onboard people to your app, but we also try and re-engage. So we have the ability to give users NFTs, give them badges. Those badges can, of course, be observed by other applications, which is super helpful for sort of cross-application growth patterns. We have the global search, which allows you to sort of, in this case, search for apps, but in general, you can search for sort of people, which is another widget, or you can search for NFTs or whatever you want. So yeah, acquisition's good. Everything you need to acquire your first 100 users. Next up is retention. You want to keep your 100 users around without having to constantly pour money into acquiring, which is always a bit of a pain. So people aren't going to like your app if they use it once. They're going to start liking it when they've used it 10 times. So we focus a lot on re-engagement. So socials for re-engagement, get pulled back in, get mentioned. notifications, make anywhere you are near the org or any of these sort of gateways, you will always get notifications which sort of allow you to keep track of what's going on, because obviously you don't have to go in and check every application that you've used on the boss every time you want to do something. And then finally, you have the sort of last step of getting your users really into your application, which is you've used the engagement, you've used the onboarding, all this kind of stuff, and you finally want to get them off to your own application in your own place. So we have a sort of almost one-click deployment system, which basically sort of, provided you have a Vercel app, will deploy your sort of whole instance of the boss. You can then customize the landing page, so you have it in your own domain, customize the landing page, include what you want to include, don't include what you don't want to include, theme it, do whatever you like, sort of arbitrary code, obviously. And this allows you to sort of make something your own, keep things in line with existing branding. So for example, if you already have a page, you may want to sort of make sure that people aren't being knocked over to somewhere else. And for sort of enterprise customers, they really like having things very much under their control and not have a bunch of other things flying around. And then finally, sort of you've locked people in. That's quite a negative word, but sort of you've got people using your app sort of on your own terms. Let's help you grow. So the first thing is go multi-chain. When users use these applications, they essentially have no concept of what chain they're using. Because the keys are all stored somewhere quite well hidden, in general, users should have the same concept of what chain they're using as you do when you're using AWS or Azure, which is, as a developer, you only expose it if you feel the user needs to know that. And generally, I'd say that's not the case. So if you have an NFT marketplace on Polkadot and you want to start showing one on Ethereum, very, very easy. Or you want to start doing it on Near, you want to do a bit of trading, sort of expand across as many chains as you can. So we have, right now we can currently do it using MetaMask, but in the future, once we have these sort of keys on chain, we'll have the ability to do it using FastAuth, which is a much nicer onboarding experience. You can also scale into new devices. We have a mobile SDK coming out. We have the ability to sort of resize these things, rebuild these things, pull these into different applications and different experiences. So your component may show up in the last place you'd expect it to show up. So if you make a DEX, someone else may integrate it into an app without you even knowing about it, which of course is great for your DEX. And then finally, we have a quite nice ability to sort of fork applications to localize, but also just sort of internal localization, which is very important if you're expanding globally. So yeah, it's mostly reusable. You can pretty much pick up the code you have in React and drop it in. Do it any way you like, do it on any chain you like, and don't burden your users with the cognitive overhead of these kind of things. Localization should work without them thinking, multi-chain should work without them thinking. These components will work where your users are. So yeah, that's kind of that's broadly our hypothesis with the BOS. We want to make it as easy as possible. We want to basically add as much value when you put your front end where we are. And front ends, they're not the most necessarily glamorous place for a blockchain company, but everything we're doing is on chain. We're using some really top-notch technology. And the great thing about the stuff we built is it looks really easy. It was really hard to build, lots of really nasty stuff, gas models, horrible key sharing algorithms, all this kind of stuff. But your users won't notice any of it. And that's really how we succeed as an industry. When people stop talking about blockchain apps and just start talking about, hey, this is a really cool app I use, and maybe finding out it was decentralized 6 months later. So thanks so much for listening to me. I'm really happy to be talking again at a Polkadot event again, because I think we should be working together much more than we currently are.
Thank you, David. I got an NFT, that most NFT on Near, but I lost my key. Yeah.